Welcome back to Superbly Said Advanced English Vocabulary and Phrases.
Yeah, and today's advanced vocabulary comes directly from a SpeakDuo lesson. You can go to SpeakDuo.com to meet new people from around the world who are practicing English on video calls to become more confident with their English speaking abilities.
Right, so we are jumping straight into our idioms for today, and let me tell you, this deep dive is strictly for advanced English learners.
Absolutely.
We have gathered all this workplace data, linguistic history, and, notes from advanced English seminars. We just want to bring you these 9 really powerful phrases.
It's going to be great.
Yeah, and have you ever noticed that the most dangerous moments in your career aren't necessarily when you lack the right skills? Like, it's actually when someone else controls the flow of information.
Oh, totally. That is so true.
Right. So we are going to start by looking at exactly how information is handled, like how you are deprived of it and how you manage to summarize it perfectly. That brings us to our very first phrase, which is in the dark.
I mean, it is an absolute classic.
Huh.
By definition, to be in the dark means you are not informed, or you are just entirely unaware of important information.
Right, yeah.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture of office politics or social dynamics, well, it is really about the strategic flow of information.
Like gatekeeping, kind of.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You might hear people say they were out of the loop, which sounds similar, but the nuance is incredibly distinct. Being out of the loop usually just suggests you missed a routine update.
Wait, so what's the difference exactly?
Well, being out of the loop is an administrative error, like maybe someone just forgot to CC you on an email. But being kept in the dark implies a much more profound and often deliberate withholding of crucial facts. Information is currency, and keeping someone in the dark is a total power play.
Wow, yeah, that makes sense. It literally feels like trying to navigate an office with the lights turned off. You know things are happening all around you. You can hear the keyboards clicking, but you absolutely cannot see the layout of the room.
That is a great way to put it.
Like, imagine having this conversation with your boss. You say, the team kept me in the dark about the new project deadline until the very last minute. You aren't just saying you missed a memo. You are telling your boss that you are fundamentally deprived of the ability to do your job.
Precisely. It carries a really heavy weight of exclusion and intentionality. Now, contrast that feeling of total manufactured ignorance with our next phrase, which is about absolute, perfect accuracy. And that is, hit the nail on the head.
Hit the nail on the head, okay.
Yeah, this means to describe something exactly right, or to successfully identify the main point of a complex situation.
Okay, let's unpack this for a second. I mean, isn't this just a fancy way of saying someone is right?
Well, not exactly.
Like, why go through the trouble of the woodworking metaphor instead of just saying you are correct?
What's fascinating here is the absolute precision and efficiency it implies. It is not just about being factually correct. You can compare it to the phrase, on the money.
Right, I've heard that one.
Yeah, if you are on the money, you are generally correct about a situation or a prediction. But hitting the nail on the head specifically means you successfully identified the absolute root cause or the core issue of a highly complex system.
Oh, I see.
Think about how a nail works. If you hit it on the side, it bends and ruins the wood. You have to strike the exact point of impact with zero wasted effort to drive it home.
Ah, so it's about finding that one central lever that moves the whole machine.
Exactly.
So if you are taking an exam, like the IELTS Speaking Part 2, and you're asked about a time you solved a complex problem, you could say something like, I hit the nail on the head when I suggested a simpler workflow to reduce mistakes because communication was the real issue.
That is a perfect example.
It tells the examiner you didn't just guess a solution, you diagnosed the exact root of the disease.
Exactly. It shows mastery over a chaotic situation. And, that brings us to a fascinating conceptual transition. We have just talked about accurately identifying the absolute truth, but what happens when an organization is terrified of that truth?
Oh, that happens all the time.
Right. From identifying reality, we move to the art of avoidance and secrecy. Let's start with the phrase, turn a blind eye.
Okay, so to turn a blind eye means intentionally ignoring something wrong or inconvenient. You see the issue perfectly clearly, but you just pretend you don't.
And we really need to explore the psychology here to distinguish this from giving the benefit of the doubt. That is a very common point of confusion for learners.
Oh, yeah, I can see how those get mixed up.
Right, because giving someone the benefit of the doubt means you genuinely aren't sure if their action was malicious or wrong, so you just assume the best of their intention.
I'm being optimistic.
Exactly. But turning a blind eye is an act of willful ignorance. It means you know for an absolute fact that it is wrong, but you deliberately, consciously choose not to act on it because acting would be too painful or politically costly.
Think about your own office. Who is the person incentivized to ignore bad behavior? You might see a workplace scenario where you say, the supervisor turned a blind eye to minor mistakes to avoid upsetting the team or causing conflict.
Right, it's a calculated decision.
Yeah, a self-preserving decision to ignore reality just to maintain superficial peace.
Which is a different mechanism entirely from our next phrase, which is sweep under the rug. To sweep something under the rug means hiding a problem instead of dealing with it openly.
I see the distinction between ignoring a problem and covering it up. But, couldn't sweeping under the rug just be a byproduct of turning a blind eye if left unchecked?
What do you mean?
Like if you turn a blind eye long enough, eventually someone notices the mess, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to actively sweep it under the rug to survive an audit.
That is a brilliant way to connect them. There are sequential steps in corporate dysfunction. Turning a blind eye is ignoring a problem as it happens in real time. But sweeping it under the rug requires active physical effort to hide the evidence after the fact. You are actively manipulating the environment so no one else can see the problem you ignored.
That makes the stakes so much higher. In a conversation with a colleague, you might complain, they tried to sweep the scheduling conflict under the rug instead of resolving the issue and fixing the process.
Yes, exactly.
You were accusing leadership of an active cover-up, not just passive cowardice.
And speaking of covering things up, this raises an important question about what we conceal in our personal lives, not just at the office.
Right, the personal stuff.
Yeah, that brings us to our fifth phrase, having a skeleton in the closet. This refers to a hidden, factual, and possibly embarrassing secret that someone prefers to keep deeply private.
It is such a vivid, almost gothic image. You open the normal-looking bedroom door and boom, there is the explosive evidence of a past life.
It really paints a picture.
I know some learners might confuse this with having emotional baggage, though.
Oh, that's a good point. The distinction there is crucial for advanced fluency. Baggage refers to past trauma or difficult emotional experiences that affect your current behavior.
Like actual luggage.
Right. Think about actual luggage. You carry it with you, it slows you down, and it is often highly visible to the people around you, even if you don't want it to be.
Yeah, people can see your baggage.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A skeleton in the closet, however, is locked away. It is a specific, factual secret that you actively guard. It doesn't necessarily weigh down your daily behavior, but it would be utterly scandalous if it were discovered.
I can see this being a fantastic phrase for a high-level debate topic. If you are asked about the boundaries of privacy in an IELTS response, you could argue not all secrets need to be revealed. Some skeletons in the closet are personal and don't need to be shared unless they affect others.
That demonstrates a highly sophisticated grasp of the idiom's weight.
So far, we have looked at how people hide their failures or their scandalous pasts. Let's flip that entirely. How do we describe people who actively overcompensate to fix problems, or who recognize they are failing, or who have to manage their own reactions?
That's a great pivot.
Yeah, this brings us to action, restraint, and misdirection. Phrase number 6 is to go the extra mile. This means doing more than is expected to achieve something or to help someone.
It is universally positive, but to grasp its advanced usage, we have to compare it to pulling your weight.
Okay, pulling your weight.
Yeah, if you are pulling your weight, you are doing exactly what your job description requires. No more, no less. You are meeting the baseline expectations so the boat doesn't sink.
Right.
Going the extra mile means you are voluntarily, deliberately exceeding those expectations when absolutely no one would have blamed you for going home.
Like when someone really saves your day at the office, you might tell your boss, my colleague went the extra mile by staying late to help me finish an urgent report and learn the new system. They weren't obligated to stay, but they chose to.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
But what happens when you try to go the extra mile and you suddenly realize you don't have the skills to survive there?
Oh no, that's the worst.
That brings us to being out of one's depth. This means being in a situation that is completely beyond one's knowledge or ability.
I feel like we all experience this imposter syndrome at some point. But how is that different from biting off more than you can chew?
It comes down to volume versus skill. Biting off more than you can chew usually relates to taking on too much volume of work.
Like having too many projects.
Right. You have the skills to do the tasks, but you lack the time or capacity to finish them all. Being out of your depth is a water metaphor for a reason. You fundamentally lack the specific skills or knowledge required for the task, regardless of how much time you have.
Wow.
You stepped into a pool, expecting the water to be at your waist, and suddenly there was no floor beneath you. You are drowning in complexity.
That terrifying feeling of your feet not touching the bottom, I could easily see myself saying, I felt out of my depth when asked to lead a highly technical meeting, so I asked for support and prepared more.
Yes, exactly.
It is an honest admission of a knowledge gap rather than just a time management issue.
Exactly. And sometimes when you are in those high-pressure, deep-water situations, the best action is no action at all. Our 8th phrase is to hold your tongue. This means restraining yourself from speaking, especially to avoid trouble.
Let me throw a theory at you. It feels like holding your tongue is more of an emergency brake, whereas keeping a secret is the parking brake.
Oh, like that.
You use one to avoid a catastrophic crash in the heat of the moment, and you use the other to keep things stationary long-term.
I love that analogy. Keeping a secret is a long-term passive state of withholding information. Holding your tongue is a momentary, highly intense, almost neurological restraint to stop yourself from saying something you will immediately regret.
Yeah.
It is the active willpower of swallowing your pride.
Like, I held my tongue during the heated meeting when a teammate criticized my work, choosing to keep things professional and address it privately later. It takes so much active willpower to just sit there and not detonate the room.
It really does.
Yeah.
And finally, for our last phrase before the quiz, we have to look at what happens when you take action, but your underlying logic is entirely flawed.
Okay, what's this one?
You are barking up the wrong tree. This means making a mistaken assumption about how to achieve something or who is responsible for a situation.
I have heard people use this interchangeably with missing the mark. Are they really the same thing?
Not at all. Missing the mark means your fundamental goal was correct, like you aimed at the right target, but your execution failed. You shot the arrow, but the wind blew it off course.
Right.
Barking up the wrong tree comes from hunting dogs tracking prey. Imagine a dog howling at the base of an oak tree, completely convinced a raccoon is up there, but the raccoon actually hopped over to the pine tree 10 minutes ago.
Oh, wow.
All of that intense energy is completely misdirected because the foundational premise is wrong.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So if someone blames you unfairly during a corporate investigation, you can confidently say, if you think I'm the one who missed the deadline, you're barking up the wrong tree, I didn't cause the delay.
Yeah, exactly.
You are telling them their entire investigation is pointing at an empty oak tree.
Precisely. Their logic is fundamentally broken from step one.
Well, I hope you have all been taking mental notes because it is time to put this advanced vocabulary to the test.
Yes, here we go.
We have a quick, intensive quiz based on the idioms we just covered. I am going to read a question and 3 possible options. I will repeat the phrase, and then I will give you a moment to lock in your answer.
This is where we solidify the knowledge. Let's see how well you grasp those subtle nuances. Here we go. Question 1. What is the best definition for the expression, to be in the dark? Option A. To be completely kept totally unaware or genuinely uninformed regarding highly important and crucial new information. Option B. To deliberately completely ignore an obviously highly dangerous situation despite receiving several advanced warnings. Option C. To be entirely physically trapped deep within an incredibly poorly lit, confined environment for an extended duration. So think about what it means to be in the dark. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct answer is option A. To be completely kept totally unaware or genuinely uninformed regarding highly important and crucial new information. Remember our phrase, to be in the dark, from the example where the boss or team strategically kept you completely unaware of the new project deadline until the last minute. Wow, that option A was quite a marathon of a sentence. Let's see what we have for the second one. Question 2. How is the phrase, to hit the nail on the head, accurately defined? Option A. To aggressively, forcefully strike a remarkably heavy industrial physical object exactly precisely within its centers. Option B. To accurately, correctly describe a specific complex situation exactly right or perfectly identify the main core point. Option C. To completely, suddenly, efficiently, unexpectedly, definitively, permanently, violently, rapidly, successfully end a big debate. What does it really mean to hit the nail on the head? Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
You're looking for option B. To accurately, correctly describe a specific complex situation exactly right or perfectly identify the main core point. Just like our IELTS example, to hit the nail on the head happens when you suggest a simpler workflow because you correctly identify the communication was the real root issue.
Option A sounded like heavy construction work. Let's tackle the next one. Question 3. If someone is described as citing to turn a blind eye, what exactly are they doing? Option A. To suffer a highly devastating, severe medical ocular injury directly resulting from a dangerous workplace environment. Option B. To completely, violently, forcefully, severely, incredibly, aggressively, truly, deliberately, effectively attack a blind person. Option C. To deliberately, deeply, successfully, and safely, perfectly ignore a truly wrong or inconvenient situation. If you decide to turn a blind eye, what are you doing? Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The answer is option C. To deliberately, intentionally, deeply, successfully, and safely perfectly ignore a truly wrong or inconvenient situation. We use turn a blind eye when discussing the willful ignorance of the supervisor who ignored minor mistakes just to avoid upsetting the team.
Thankfully, it is not a severe medical injury like option A suggested. Next question. Question 4. What does a person mean when they go the extra mile? Option A. To actively, continuously do significantly more than is normally expected to successfully achieve a goal or help others. Option B. To completely, physically, truly, carefully, safely, effectively, wonderfully, gracefully, intensely, perfectly, exactly, walk far. Option C. To officially, fiercely, totally, aggressively, forcefully, successfully, rapidly, efficiently, strictly, entirely, completely win. Consider what it means when you go the extra mile. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
Option A is correct. To actively, continuously do significantly more than is normally expected to successfully achieve a goal or help others. Remember the workplace scenario where a colleague decided to go the extra mile by voluntarily staying late to help you finish that urgent report?
That is a lot of adverbs in those fake options. Halfway through the quiz, question 5. Which of the following describes what it means to sweep something under the rug? Option A. To completely, vigorously, actively, carefully, heavily, cleanly, efficiently, totally, intensely, strongly sweep a dirty floors. Option B. To successfully, secretly, intentionally, officially hide a severe problem instead of dealing with it entirely openly now. Option C. To perfectly, completely, safely, accurately, confidently, smoothly, flawlessly, naturally, firmly, permanently clean. What does it look like to sweep something under the rug? Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The correct choice is option B. To successfully, secretly, intentionally, officially hide a severe problem instead of dealing with it entirely openly now. In our earlier discussion, colleagues tried to sweep something under the rug when they engaged in a cover-up to hide a scheduling conflict rather than fixing the actual process.
Moving right along to the deep water. Question 6. What occurs when a person is considered to be out of one's depth? Option A. To genuinely, successfully, carefully, entirely, deeply swim far outside, completely visibly marked, totally safe ocean zones. Option B. To entirely, physically, rapidly, entirely safely, intensely, incredibly, effectively, purposefully dive completely deeply down. Option C. To be entirely currently stuck in a deeply complex situation that is completely far beyond your knowledge or abilities. Think carefully about being out of one's depth. Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
It is option C, to be entirely currently stuck in a deeply complex situation that is completely far beyond your knowledge or abilities. Recall the example where you felt out of one's depth when asked to lead a highly technical meeting without the necessary background skills.
Almost done. 2 left. Question 7. What does it mean if you happen to hold your tongue? Option A. To carefully, successfully, deliberately restrain yourself from speaking, especially to completely avoid possible troubles. Option B. To completely, actively, physically, incredibly, aggressively, forcefully, entirely, deeply, carefully grasp your tongue. Option C. To entirely, confidently, strongly, bravely, deeply, actively, openly, completely, successfully, safely, proudly, officially speak. What exactly happens when you hold your tongue? Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
That would be option A. To carefully, successfully, deliberately restrain yourself from speaking, especially to completely avoid possible troubles. You had to pull the emergency brake and hold your tongue during that heated meeting when a teammate criticized your work so you could address it professionally later.
And please, never physically grasp your tongue like option B suggested. Here is the final question of our superbly said quiz. Question 8. What happens when someone actively hides a skeleton in the closet? Option A. To successfully, physically, completely, accurately, totally, heavily, cleanly, actively, genuinely, officially, perfectly secure. Option B. A completely hidden and totally possibly embarrassing personal secret that someone strictly prefers to fully keep quiet. Option C. A highly visible and publicly celebrated personal achievement that everyone knows about. What does it mean to hide a skeleton in the closet? Feel free to pause the podcast here if you need to think about the answer.
The final correct answer is option B. A completely hidden and totally possibly embarrassing personal secret that someone strictly prefers to fully keep quiet. We talked about how having a skeleton in the closet was a great point for an IELTS debate on why some highly explosive personal secrets don't need to be shared with the public.
Amazing. If you played along with all 8 of those, you have seriously leveled up your comprehension today.
You know, before we finish, I want to leave you with a broader concept to mull over.
Okay, what is it?
Well, consider how deeply physical our language is. We just spent this entire deep dive talking about sweeping floors, hitting nails, physically holding tongues, and going miles.
Wow, yeah, we did.
It shows that even in professional, corporate, or academic environments where we are supposed to be purely logical and data-driven, our brains still fundamentally rely on highly physical, tangible imagery to understand and navigate complex social dynamics. We simply cannot escape our physical nature, even in a boardroom.
Wow, the idea that the corporate world thinks it is so advanced, but we're still using our hands to feel our way through the dark office, or using hunting dogs to explain a spreadsheet error. I love that. I want to sincerely congratulate you for taking the time to upgrade your English toolkit with us today. Take these phrases, drop them into your next SpeakDuo call, or confidently use them in your upcoming IELTS exam. You are ready? Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you on the next one.